I'm going to take this mask off just to speak, if that's okay with everybody. Just 1 minute here. Good? All right. Good afternoon. I want to thank you for joining us today. I also want to thank some members of my command staff, Councilwoman Tabitha Taylor from Council District A, as well as Reed Ebarb, the president of the Crime Stoppers Board of Directors, is here to join me in today's comments, and they'll be available if we have any follow-up questions that they would be better at answering versus myself. As you know, our cities and communities nationwide have seen spikes in violent crime during the last few weeks, and unfortunately, Shreveport is no different. To date, our city has suffered 33 homicides, and countless others have been injured during a rash of violence that is unacceptable and cannot be tolerated. We need the help of our citizenry now more than ever. Too often, witnesses don't come forward, and even victims of this violence sometimes refuse to cooperate with law enforcement. We cannot effectively reduce crime without cooperation from those who are most often targeted. I urge you to contact law enforcement or Crime Stoppers when you know about threats of violence or incidents that may escalate. Allow us to intervene before someone is injured or killed. An entire generation can be affected by one senseless murder. Whether the family of the victim or of the suspect, that person's life is forever changed. Let's end the violence together. The Shreveport Police Department recently implemented a violent crimes task force consisting of officers from our Investigations Division, Intelligence Unit, and Office of Special Investigations to target known offenders and get them off of our streets before they can cause more violence. An emergency supplemental patrol program is being formulated whereby all officers, corporals, and sergeants will be assigned to a squad. These squads will take weekly rotations, during which time officers assigned to that squad will work mandatory overtime as needed to ensure patrol shifts are properly staffed. We are facing a shortage of manpower, and recruiting qualified applicants has proven difficult in recent years. Again, this is a national problem, but I am concerned about the Shreveport Police Department, and we will work even harder to ensure our citizens receive the level of service and protection that each person deserves. An internal committee for change has been created within the ranks of the police department, and the group consists of veteran supervisors from throughout the agency who make suggestions and provide feedback to me and my command staff so that we can ensure the agency is progressing for the good of the city and for our employees. The group is working on suggestions we plan to present to the Public Safety Committee and ultimately to the City Council to reduce police response to non-criminal offenses. Reducing response to non-criminal calls for service will allow officers to focus on crime and be more proactive in efforts to prevent crime. An example will be police responding to private property accidents if there are no injuries or damages to private property. Those involved would simply exchange information and contact their insurance agency. That one change in procedure could reduce the need to respond to hundreds, if not thousands, of calls per year, extra time that could be spent on more pertinent matters. Over the last couple of years, we have coordinated efforts with other law enforcement agencies that serve citizens in Northwest Louisiana in multi-agency visible presence operations. Essentially, we're going to flood some of the crime-ridden areas of our city with additional resources, which will include officers, troopers, deputies, and agents from local, state, and federal agencies. We are putting the criminal element on notice that the good citizens of Shreveport want their streets back, and we're going to take them back. As I close, I want to make you aware of a renewed initiative from our Crime Stopper partners. Crime Stoppers is bringing back their In the Silence, Stop the Violence campaign, which will pay citizens a minimum of $750 for tips that result in the seizure of illegal weapons on our streets. Call Crime Stoppers at 673-7373 or at the P3 Tips app, which is available for all devices. Finally, we need you to support the hard work being done by our law enforcement officers on a daily basis. Get to know the officers that patrol your neighborhood and establish those important relationships. Without that level of trust between police and our citizenry, improvement is difficult, if not impossible. Councilwoman, do you have any comments you would like to make?
Good afternoon. On Friday, I sent an email to the administration outlining some coordinated efforts that I think that we can do to solve crime within our communities. When I say coordinated effort, I mean that effort has to be between the City of Shreveport, our police department, our partnering agencies, civic organizations, church, and the community. My personal initiative is taking our community back block by block. I am calling on men within my district, in District A, to adopt a block, and we're going to revitalize that block so we can rid ourselves of the crime element that is there. When you see blighted properties, that we do not want to create a haven for criminal activities within our community. I have already received responses from members within the City of Shreveport, because as a citizen, as a councilwoman, as a mother, I cannot take another child being shot while he's sitting up in his house eating pizza. So I'm delivering a strong message to you, and my message may be a little bit different in the Chiefs, but it's coordinated. I will not allow you to take over the City of Shreveport. There is not going to be citizens who have worked hard and paid their dues for you to sit here and think that you're just going to have a field day when it comes to our city. We are sick and tired of the killings that we have within our neighborhoods. So that is why I put the call out to men. That is why I put the call out to churches, because we have to get to the point that we either step up or we shut up. I use that term loosely. I am committing myself and dedicating myself to not only my district, but to the City of Shreveport. And I am asking those people that are interested in taking our city back and ridding ourselves of this element to join me. I have already received responses from Alfonso Jackson, from Alvin Oliver, and those men that are willing to step up to the plate. So I'm asking that within this community, that these are the things that we do. Listen, crime is going to be a joint effort. We know that public trust has to be restored within our community, and it's going to take the tough conversations that people don't want to have. And so get ready for the living room outside discussions that need to take place with Shreveport Police Department as well as the community. So at that particular point, I'm going to leave it right there, but we will not have you, and I reiterate again, we will not have you taking over our city with this violence. We're putting you on proper notice as of today.
Councilwoman, I would open the floor up to any questions that you may have at this time. If I can't answer them, certainly somebody on my staff probably will be able to offer a response.
I'll step in late good evening. Not sure if you covered this live. I also want to ask, what are the future plans or proposals that you guys have in reference to trying to stop the senseless violence and the shooting and killing?
Well, I'm hoping it's a combination, so I'll mention 3 or 4 things. The Violent Crimes Task Force, and I don't want to get too deep into the weeds is exactly what their strategy is, but it's an investigative and intelligence-driven strategy to focus on those members of the community that one of 2 things. We either know they're going to be the suspect in a violent crime or they're going to be a victim in a violent crime, and it's based on their lifestyle and some previous history with that individual. So we're going to focus, targeting investigations on them. The second part of it is that emergency supplemental patrol program. A large part of keeping violence down and reducing crime is having an adequate number of police officers on the streets 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We are 81 officers down as of today. And so that's low. Our staffing numbers are low. It's a national problem, not just a Shreveport problem. But the way to address that is to have more of our officers participate in patrol ride-outs, have more of our officers on the street that may not ordinarily, ride in a patrol capacity. The third thing is if I can reduce some of those non-criminal calls that we respond to, then I'm not going to be tied up, for 30, 45 minutes or even an hour writing that accident report that happened on a parking lot. I can spend that 30, 45 minutes or an hour proactively policing, trying to get weapons off the streets, trying to prevent a fight from turning into a homicide, things of that nature. So there's several things together, and I think, you certainly just can't remove from that equation exactly what Councilman Taylor spoke to, is the continue to build that trust between law enforcement and citizens. And that's been a difficult road for the last 20 months that I've been in this position. We get really good, and then you have a national incident, and then you have incidents that cause some disconnect between law enforcement and citizens. And obviously we're aware of those issues. COVID-19 has affected that to a degree. We were doing really good with our grassroots walks and getting out in the neighborhoods and going to those community events. We haven't had those things now in 4 or 5 months. So hopefully we'll be beyond this pandemic in the near future, and we can get back to meeting face to face. Anybody else?
If you move now to move more officers on patrol, why did it take so long to make that move? Because we've seen numbers tick up
Right.
spring into the summer.
Well, and it's not so much that we're putting more officers on patrol, it's that we no longer can keep the number of officers on patrol we have had on patrol. So we started off this year with 536 police officers. We're now down to 500. So that's 36 officers that essentially came from patrol. So I'm going to use homicide investigations as an example. If I lose a homicide investigator, I've got to replace that homicide investigator. There's a select number of positions, and those officers unfortunately get called quite often. So I've got to keep that number of officers. So when I lose an officer, we literally lose a patrol officer because I'm going to plug some of those other positions. So right now we're 36 officers down on patrol, and so we've kind of just now gotten to the point where we're going to force people to work overtime. I implemented the supplemental patrol program probably the first month I took the job over November 2018, but at that time it was devised so that all officers could participate on somewhat of a volunteer basis. We expected you to ride about once per quarter on patrol, kind of keep your foot in the door and assist with those efforts. Now we're saying, no, on the week that you're on call, you're going to ride patrol because we need you on the streets.
So there will be no increase in patrol
It's not going to be...
beyond what we normally would see?
No, you're not going to see huge increases on a 24/7 basis beyond what you've seen for the last couple of years. Where you are going to see increases is some of these operations, these multi-agency cooperations. You'll see, state police vehicles, cattle parish sheriffs, more maybe city marshals, federal agencies in more mass in particular areas where we're having these spikes in crime.
The numbers right now eclipsed by a great deal in terms of homicide. The past 5 years, going down. What's the cost? Because this was a number you all touted last year, the mayor's administration as well.
Mm-hmm.
But now, you're worse than we've seen any time this far back in the 90s in terms of 7 months into the year.
Well, I don't know if that's accurate, but because I can tell you that throughout the last 5 years through June, we were 2 homicides higher than we were at that point in, I believe, 2016. So we had another high year, but no doubt this was the highest year within 5 years.
Sure, right now you're at 33. 2018, 2017, at the end of July, we're only at 24.
Right, no doubt. And what I was questioning is back to the 90s. I mean, we had, Shreveport was the third highest homicide rate per capita in 93. We had 86 homicides. So I don't think we're at that number at the end of June. But I'm not bragging on the number. We're way too high. 33 is entirely too many. We ended the year last year at 42, which was a drastic reduction from what we had in 2018. But, it's really hard for me to put my finger on, say, this is the reason. I think if you look at, again, what's going on nationally, some of the reasons could be when you had the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of our jails did not accept inmates or did not accept arrestees that were not being put in jail for violent crimes. So you had literally people that ordinarily would have been going to jail for maybe some nonviolent crimes staying on the streets. And it just, a reasonable person would have to believe that some of those people that committed crime are going to commit more crime since they're not in jail. The fact that it's now summer and a lot of our youth have been out of school for 4 or 5 months, that unfortunately causes boredom, for lack of a better word. And although there might be better ways for them to deal with their aggression or some fights or beefs, if you will, may have spewed up, violence is starting to become more the norm. I think it has to do with people being shut inside. And again, people haven't been to school for several months, so jobs are hard to find. Income has been very difficult for a number of families. The mayor was giving some statistics this morning about the number of people that are decreasing the amount of money they're spending on food because they need that money for other things. So anytime your economy is affected like that due to a pandemic, that's going to affect crime.
You don't think any of this could be street gang activity or retaliation for previous shootings?
No, some of it is. There's no doubt. There's certainly some of this is gang activity, and some of it is retaliatory. And that's what that Violent Crimes Task Force is going to focus on. So that Violent Crimes Task Force is not going to be able to prevent your domestic homicides. And unfortunately, we generally have a decent, high percentage of domestic homicides, husband, wife, partner, spousal abuse, things like that. What the Violent Crime Task Force is going to be able to identify is any gang-related activity or organized crime type activity, drug trafficking, to try to decrease that level of violence.
33 homicides, how many do you think they're coming in?
I don't know the current clearance numbers, but it's less than 50% at the time. Now, there are several cases pending DA review. The district attorney's office is backed up like everybody else due to COVID-19. They weren't able to have grand juries for a number of months, and so I'm not going to speak for the DA, but I do know that they are a little bit backed up, and we have several cases before them at this point.
As I reported that covered heavy on the crime and report, the main thing that I'm really upset is that a lot of those shootings take place in their businesses in Shreveport. And just like this previous Sunday, people woke up to news from me showing how fake gadgets were shot up, the window shot out, you know, with the whole thing top of the building. And just for that example, a lot of the shootings take place near our businesses, especially our gas stations, and none of these places have cameras. And it's my choice. Why aren't we cracking down on them, forcing them to have cameras?
And that has been a conversation. That's been a conversation we've had. We've had with council. We've had the public safety meetings. But you know, I think there's a line in there between your rights as a citizen and what the government should enforce upon you. Now, I think every business should have a camera. Let me make that clear. I wish every residence had a camera. That would be great for us. The more cameras we have, the more audio we have, the easier it is for us to solve those crimes. But you know, especially in a time of economic downfall, it's really hard to go into some of these businesses that are barely making ends meet and say, by the way, we need you to spend money on a camera, and it needs to be done by this date and things of that nature. So it's a large conversation.
I know, I just feel like we should demand it because, like, if they were to get robbed, they'd be quick to release the footage for that. But if
Right.
somebody like them, they're taken, why they always say it's not working? And then we live in a city where citizens always say, I didn't see anything, and they didn't see it. You know?
And it's unfortunate that there have been a number of instances in which we've been denied access to security camera footage, and we've had to obtain search warrants to then obtain that footage.
Chief, how many homicide detectives do you have?
Sir?
How many homicide detectives do you have?
We have got 8 officer corporals specifically assigned to homicide, as well as 2 supervisory agents, but we actually can utilize up to another 8 or so violent crimes investigators. They generally focus on other types of crimes, such as armed robberies. But we've probably got 20 people that have the ability and the certifications required in order to lead a homicide investigation.
Are they actively assisting those homicide detectives?
Yeah, in fact, this weekend, the on-call investigator was overwhelmed with cases, and so we had to start calling in some backups to assist with some of those calls we got. Yes, sir.
You mentioned the task force. Is this a re-implementation of the task force that we already had, or is this a renewed?
So this is, we have several task forces, so I don't want to act like this is the only, you know, we have the White Collar Crimes Task Force with the Caddo Parish Sheriff's Office. We still have the Narcotics Task Force in OSI that works with Caddo and Shreveport. So this is a task force consisting of Shreveport Police Department members. And when I use the word task force, it's simply taking people from various divisions and they're working collectively. So you have the investigators that typically work violent crime, so they're familiar with some of those people whose names come up often. Our intelligence community, which kind of keeps up with information going out on digital sources. And then the Office of Special Investigations that works drugs. And so often, drugs and weapons and violent crime kind of mesh together. So you get those 3 different divisions talking, and they're able to identify, so who are the big proponents of some of the major crime in Shreveport, and it kind of gives you an insight as to who do we expect could be a victim or a suspect, and let's try to focus our efforts on those individuals to get them off the street before violent crime is committed. So it could save their life, or it could prevent them from taking a life and being put in prison.
Chief, in a department that's already short-staffed, where there are some morale issues, now mandatory overtime, how do you expect the rank and file to take this news that they're even going to be working morning?
So I don't expect everybody to be excited about it, but I can tell you we're working hard to make sure that every officer, corporal, sergeant is on that list. And so it amounts to a rotation, which I don't foresee any officer working more than 4 times a year on an emergency basis where they have to work. And I think it could even be less than that. Because you're talking about roughly 350 people on this list, and we may only be short during that week of patrol 10 or 12 people, you know, throughout those 7 days. So you're not going to get, it's not like every week your squad's up that you're going to be working a shift. I really don't foresee it being that often. And we're going to continue to try to staff those vacancies by offering overtime and trying to get volunteers to work it. But
Are there mandatory buybacks?
buybacks for,
Where the officers have to work overtime even after completing the full shift?
yes, that's what this will be. That's what the emergency supplemental patrol staffing will be is, so if you work the evening shift and we're going to be short on graveyard shift and we don't have an officer to fill that position, if you're next on the list, you're filling that position. But again, I don't foresee that happening more than a handful of times per year. So I don't think it'll be, any time that you tell somebody you're going to have to work additional hours, obviously that might not be, they may not be excited about it. But the fact that we're putting everybody in that position, we're being fair about it, consistent about it, and so we're all going to share in this position that we're in of being short-staffed. And hopefully, we're recruiting right now for the next academy class. We're always recruiting. I would encourage anybody that's excited about a career in law enforcement or even curious about a career in law enforcement to reach out to our recruiting division and let us have a talk with you in ways that you can help yourself and help your city.
My last question, because I know these folks have to go, but are you going to move people out of units like community resource officers off desk jobs and stuff that can actually go to patrol more than just overtime, but full-time, particularly overnight?
So when we talk about people at desk jobs, we literally don't have anybody that just sits at a desk and they're twiddling their thumbs. We've got people that are in desk jobs, but for example, one desk job is crime statistics. And I get asked more questions about crime statistics than many things. So they're busy all the time. So if I pull them out of that position, then the next month don't ask me how many homicides we've had or how many shootings we've had or anything else, because we're not going to know, because the guy that did it is on patrol. So we're literally down to skeleton crews. We have one public information officer now. We have CLO. Yeah, so we reduced from, we had 13 CLOs about a year ago. We now have 7. So we're reducing everywhere we can. But the way we're going to address that right now is we're still going to have 7 CLOs, but every now and then that CLO is going to go work a patrol shift and assist. It's just like the guy that's working crime statistics, just as Sergeant Wilhite will as a PIO, just as Chief Raymond will as a chief. We all ride patrol and we all assist with those calls. Thank you for coming out this afternoon. Yes, ma'am.
One incident that has impacted someone trust in the department was that post from Brent Mason following the George Floyd incident. There have been some reports recently that officer was suspended. Can you confirm that?
So I'm not able to confirm or deny it. Based on the Police Officer Bill of Rights, we're not allowed to publicly speak about those matters unless there's appeal to the Civil Service Board. It becomes public. So at this point, I'm not going to be able to make any comments about it.
You can't say if an officer's been placed on administrative leave.
I can say if an officer's been placed on leave or not.
Does he remain on leave right now?
He is on leave at this point, yes. Thank y'all. A lot of turnarounds as far as personnel. We've had quite a bit of, we've had more resignations, terminations, and retirements this year than we have historically. I think there's probably a combination of things. I think there's so many different factors that could play into it. Most of the officers that I'm aware of that have leaving have found other careers in other agencies or in other areas of the state or even in other fields that they think is better for them and their family.
Okay, I know you talked about how the department is being kind of hardships and cutbacks and stuff. What are y'all doing to keep some officers?
As far as what are we doing from departmental level? We're doing our best to let them know how much they're appreciated. We're purchasing some new equipment right now, much needed. Everybody will have body cameras within the next couple of months. We're getting new tasers, which is a less lethal option. We hope to get new vehicles during next year's budget cycle. We're getting a new report management system that will allow officers to type reports in their vehicles from the field versus having handwrite reports. So there are a number of equipment purchases being made that are going to make officers' jobs easier. But I think the best thing we can do, and this is not just as chief of police, this is all of us, is let the officers know how much we respect them, we appreciate the jobs that they do, and just every opportunity to let them know that the job's not easy, but you thank them for their willingness to serve. Thank y'all.